Hello, welcome to Shooting the Breeze with Lady Liberty. I am Lady Liberty, or Kate Parental, and it's a very special episode today because it is Guy Fawkes Day. Remember, the 5th of November. It is also my 36th birthday. So I'm so blessed to be joined by two of my good friends from across the other side of the country. I am in Perth, WA. I've been celebrating on my lonesome, but that's okay. That's fine. I'm joined tonight by the man himself, Daniel Lewkovitz. He and I met a few years ago now. He flew all the way to Perth from Sydney during the pandemic to be the host when I was a lead Senate candidate for a political campaign. He is a political commentator. He's also a security expert, and he's also of Jewish descent. So you might want to see where this episode is going. Daniel, welcome to Shooting the Breeze. Thanks for joining me.
Kate, happy birthday. And that's a good thing about being over in Perth. You get an extra 4 hours of birthday that you wouldn't have if you were over east with us.
Oh, true. That's how it works. I'm from the past and you're from the future. I hope the future's a bit brighter in your states than it is in mine. You are in Sydney, New South Wales. I did live in Sydney for a few years and I miss that beautiful city. I also have joining a very special friend of mine. I am so blessed to have this amazing woman in my life. She is an inspiration of mine. I met her a few years ago now and we just hit it off. She is opposite to me in a lot of ways. She's a vegan, but don't hold that against her. She is like family to me, and I'm so blessed to have her tonight on my show. Her name is Tesa. Maya, welcome to my show. Thanks for joining me.
Happy birthday, my darling. Happy birthday, happy birthday. Thank you for having me and choosing to spend time with me, Daniel, on your birthday.
This time last year, I was in Melbourne, Victoria, helping you guys with an election campaign, and we celebrated my birthday there last year. So a bit of a different one this year, just a more tame one. I'm reformed these days. I'm celebrating with an iced coffee, not a Farmers Union one. But
look, and I'm sure when you were a little girl and people said, what do you want to do for your birthday when you're older? And you thought, I want to do a podcast on the Middle East and firearms laws,
Well, I'm very dedicated and very passionate, so I wouldn't have it any other way. And thank you to my parents for raising me to be this way. I'm still waiting for my dad to call me. He's actually away on a hunting trip. Last I heard, he had got about 406 goats in Binbowery, South Australia. Wow. So there is a goat pandemic happening there, and he'll call me later tonight, but not during the show. So let's get to it. The reason why I've invited these two incredible people on tonight is to talk about a very, how shall I say, it's an emotional topic. I spoke about it last week with my two American guests, Toad and Ben, and they gave their take on the Israel-Palestine conflict from the point of view of libertarians, which us three subscribe to the principles of libertarians, even though some of us aren't involved in the minor party that's by that name. I'm an anarchist these days, so I'm not involved in any political party. I think the whole system needs to be burnt down. Happy Guy Fawkes Day. But I'm digressing. So I wanted to get you guys on the show, and I know it's a sensitive topic for the both of you. Luca, I'm going to start with you because you've been on Sky News talking about this. You've also been on Twitter a lot, engaging in a lot of Twitter fights, Twitter wars. What's your perspective on what's happening now? I know there's a lot of history in that region, but for you as a Jewish person with family and friends there, how are you feeling? How are you going?
Well, it's interesting because I've been on countless, media appearances, podcasts and so forth. And I think this is probably the first time where someone sort of introduced me as, Daniel Lewkovitz, Jew, right? And of course, look, it's a relevant disclosure here because obviously, if we're going to be talking about the Middle East, I probably have a dog in this fight. But I think you're also going to see something here that you don't get to see often, which is people who probably have polar opposite views on things still able to articulate, a mature debate. I mean, I am friends with you, Kate. I am friends with you, Maya. Maya's an Arab, right? I'm Jewish. And the thing that she and I both know, we've had arguments about, Middle Eastern politics before. And, I've lived in the Middle East and I've sat down at a dinner table with, a table full of Jews, a table full of Christians, table full of Arabs, Druze, you name it. And, once the conversation inevitably turns around to politics and conflict, we all start arguing and talking, and we will argue, but then, at the end of that, it's like, pass the hummus, we'll have dinner. and we'll eat. And that's exactly what's going to happen here, because, Maya and I are going to have very different viewpoints. She'll be wrong, but it doesn't matter. At the end of that, we're still actually going to be able to have friends, and we're going to be able to talk to each other, which is so different to Twitter, where, or any form of social media where people sort of adopt this viewpoint that says, it is a fight to the death. And so one of two things will happen. You will never cede any ground. You will never agree that the other person is correct. You will not listen to what they're saying. And when you finally had enough of it, you're going to block them because they must never be heard from again. And as a tool in critical thinking, I think that's a disaster, because one of the most important parts of critical thinking is actually being able to listen to people who have different opinions. And rather than trying to sort of beat them to death with yours and convince them that you are wrong and show them all the reasons why, what you can actually do is you can go, well, hang on, actually, you know what? I do agree with that. That's very interesting. Maybe you can find some common ground. And this is how, things like this get settled. Now, in terms of, the two topics that you're talking about tonight, because it's going to be the Middle East, it's going to be what's happening between Gaza and Israel, the Palestinians, and it's going to be about firearms. Those are two singularly unique issues, because 99% of people have absolutely no idea about either of those topics, right? Despite which 100% of people have an absolutely strong opinion on it. So you can go to people who have never held a firearm, have never seen a firearm, have never touched a firearm, have never been within striking range of a firearm. They will have an opinion on gun laws, even though they don't know what they are. And the Middle East is the same. And so, it is this kind of polarizing, divisive thing. And I think it's actually really important to be able to sit down. There's not a lot of hummus here. I'm very disappointed with this, Maya, as I'm sure are you, but we can actually have these conversations and we can nut some things out. So coming back to what you were saying before, wow, it's been a really tough few weeks. I have a lot of friends and family in Israel. I also have business partners in Israel. And, everybody in that country, it's a really small place. Everybody is like 1 or 2 degrees of separation from someone who is directly impacted by this. So there's probably not a single person in Israel who hasn't been to, a funeral in the last week or so. And there's a unique thing that I think sort of a thread that joins almost every Jewish person around the world, and that is that we all sort of have this common shared ancestry, a shared experience, a shared history. And, so when something as horrific as what happened on the 7th of October happens in Israel, there's probably not many Jewish people anywhere in the world that weren't directly impacted on that. But then there was this kind of 1-2 punch, because not only was there that horrific, monstrous attack when Hamas terrorists penetrated Israel and basically killed the largest group of Jews that had been massacred since the Holocaust. But then also in Western countries, there was this sudden outpouring of what was basically anti-Semitism. Now, to be clear, I'm not necessarily talking about legitimate criticism of Israel. I'm talking about people who were saying that the Jewish state has no right to exist, people who were openly supporting Hamas. In Sydney, where I'm from, the night that happened, so this was before Israel had even, done anything in response, there were people in Arab communities in southwestern Sydney who were setting off fireworks. I mean, they were literally celebrating that. And, that disgusted me for a couple of reasons. One, because they were literally celebrating the murder of babies, of women, of children, of whole families that had been burned to death. And they were celebrating that, but also because I'm not allowed fireworks, and that really sucks.
I was waiting for, where's your button, the laugh button? You're going to do the sound effects.
And happy Guy Fawkes Day,
Yeah. Now, Maya, you have a very different view of the situation than Luko, and it's good that you've come on my show, not because I need quality content, which I'm committed to producing, but because it shows maturity. And Luko, you're right. The people here that just don't want to hear the other person's point of view, or they've already made up their mind, we're seeing it now. Now, this divisive politics, it's not just this issue. We saw it with The Voice. We've seen it with COVID and the handling of that. Dividing us is how governments are winning. That's my opinion. I'm anti-war. I'm also a Christian. So I've always wanted to go to Jerusalem and see where Jesus was born and walk, because I do have that Christian Catholic. I'm Irish Italian. I don't really have a choice. So that's my connection to the land. I've always wanted to visit there. I'm terrified about going there because of what's going on. But how do you feel you've got family, you've got friends there? What's your view on what's going on, and how are you handling it?
I think there's only one word to really describe this tragedy, and it's heartbreaking. It's heartbreaking for both sides. We are in a place where right now in society, our leaders don't understand how the current conversations going on in society, and by them continuously pouring fuel on the fire through division, it's causing so much damage to our communities. Now, a week ago, no, sorry, it's not a week ago. It's probably about 2 weeks ago now, just before October 7th happened. No one asked if you're Jewish. No one knew if you were Arab. You just walked in, you ordered your food, you went to your local milk bar, fish and chip store. No one cared. No one cared. And all of a sudden, the conflict has hit Australia like a thunderstorm. Now, a little bit about my history. I was born in Lebanon. I was born and the civil war was happening. So 1983, when I was born, there you go. Now you got my age. And my family suffered a lot. I saw things from a very, very young age that I will never unsee. And all I did was question why. Why was this happening? Why was this happening? Why was this happening? And so for me, it's always been really, it's played a huge part of my life, the Palestinian conflict, because Lebanon hosts the largest Palestinian refugee camp in the world. So I've sat with them. I've spoken with them. Prior to COVID, I was visiting Lebanon every 2 years because I have young children and I want them to know their heritage and I want them to know their grandparents and the rest of it. And we always went and we always gave back and we always spoke and we understood what was happening in the Middle East conflict. I think the opening up of social media, and especially spaces like Twitter, probably brought what I've seen my entire life to the forefront, uncensored to the Australian public for the first time. Because when we see war, we see these images on the news of drones and just it's black and white and there's a bomb and there's an image of a grey person running away from this, huge explosion. What we don't see is the families that have died, the children that have been decapitated, blown into thousands of pieces, the families that for generations and generations have been wiped off the map. I will go out on the record and say I will never condone violence. I don't care what. I will never condone violence and I will never condone war. But the conversation and the level of rhetoric that is being used by a lot of political organizations now to be on the moral right side, whichever side they sit, is dividing us further and further. And it's not helping the conflict. It's not helping the civilians. It's not helping the people on the ground who actually need it. So we need to be having these open conversations with people who've lived an experience, who can give you their side so that you can make up your mind. So you can say, hey, how do I make sure I don't go into a rabbit hole of one side or the other? How do I change my algorithms? Because the one thing that I need your viewers to understand is that if you are seeing something and it's consistent, then you are being fed. You are being fed what you are being seen. So actively go out there and look at the other side. Find the other side. It might repulse you to say, oh, I don't want to see that because I don't like them. I don't believe in them. But listen before you make an objective opinion. And there is so much trauma in that region. The Jewish people through the Holocaust have suffered for years and years and years. There are still people who are alive who've been in those internment camps. Robert Sinona's passed away recently and she was in an internment camp. So it's, this didn't just affect Jewish people. She's Roman Catholic, but she was on the border of Italy, North Italy, and she got captured, and these things happen. For myself, I've seen the worst of both sides. From Lebanon, it's more Hezbollah than Hamas. And I've seen their rise, and I've understood how they've risen to the powers that they've risen. I really do understand why people do support them.
And why do you think that is? Especially
sheer desperation.
Desperation.
It's sheer desperation. It's about trying to have a voice when you don't have one. The only way I can explain it to people is when we look at the COVID lockdowns and we look at those first few freedom rallies that started happening, and then we got people coming in, loads of people coming in going, yeah, I feel empowered by those people, so I want to join in and I want to bring my message. But then, the fringe came in and they had a message and they had a message, and you didn't really agree with it, but you still wanted to fight for your rights. And you were like, I want to see my family. I want to go to a funeral. I want to visit my loved ones. And it was sheer desperation that grew that movement to where it was. It wasn't because everyone agreed on that side. Hezbollah and Hamas came about from desperation.
And one of the interesting things is, and again, I mean, this is where you really drill down to sort of religious and sectarian issues and so forth. So, Islam has a number of sects within it, and Hamas are Sunni, and Hezbollah are Shia, or Shiite as you sometimes hear. And in theory, those two groups hate each other, and yet both of those groups in turn are being funded by Iran. So, Iran's almost like playing two sides, off against each other. So you've also got all these, shadowy actors and things like that are happening in the background. And the big losers in all of this are the ordinary, everyday civilians who really just want to be left alone. Now, what's happening in Gaza at the moment hasn't spilled over into Lebanon, thank God. But you've probably got Iran who would, very much like to sort of stir things up there to take the heat off them. And of course, there's also bad act. I'm going to turn off the background because it's just going to, it's making Maya's curtains look professional. So, part of what's happening there is I think there's probably actors in a number of countries who need to get a few things done before there's a change of who's sitting in the White House, because I think that's going to have a big impact. One of the things that I find very interesting is getting on TikTok, getting on Twitter, and looking at Arab Twitter and TikTok. And you either need to be fluent in Arabic, or you need to at least be able to have it automatically translated for you. And that's been really, really fascinating, because I could spend the whole time listening to my tribe, my political tribe, my followers, people I follow, but you actually want to go into the sort of different rabbit hole to learn what's going on. And something that I found very interesting in this particular conflict is historically, in the first Intifada, in the second Intifada, in every single war, the whole Arab world would erupt, because even though the reality is most of the Arab countries can't stand each other, they all fight with each other, and then there's groups within each country that all fight with each other. But the one thing they could all agree on, they hated the Jews, right? So,
it's not true, Luke.
No, well, a lot.
No,
listen,
no,
don't get me wrong.
No. There's a difference, and this is where we really need to draw a line. Israel and Jews. Now, I understand that Israel was born about for the Jewish people, as a Jewish state. Okay, but no one hates the Jews. My grandmother grew up with Jewish neighbors in Lebanon.
Hang on, Maya, you're Druze, right?
But that doesn't matter.
No, it does. Because,
no, it doesn't.
Because if you look at some of the Islamic writing, for example, the Hamas Charter, it's very clear that Jews must be killed. Now, the Jews never said that. The Christians never said that. The Maronites never said that.
No.
So I don't include all Arabs, in that group, but I'm talking like at a national level. Right?
So in Lebanon, there's over 40 religions. There's over 40 religions in one tiny country.
That's a lot.
Okay, it is a lot. Okay, and it was one of the reasons I opposed the voice, because to stop part of the civil war was that they turned around and they said, we'll change the constitution so every minority group gets a voice, religious minority group, not, race minority group. And Lebanon is stagnant, economically collapsed, and you can't get anything done unless you know someone and you can pay them off. So that was that. But let's make something very, very clear. The Arabs don't hate the Jews. The Jews have been a part of the Arab sort of history for a really, really long time, whether it be in a small population, whether it be in a larger population, but there was never hate. The hate has come from the fact that they have never been brought to the table at the same level.
So where I was going with that was saying that, I mean, I don't agree with you there, because I think that there have been absolute examples where there was massive levels of hatred. But the interesting thing very recently with what's happened in the last few weeks is when I'm looking at Arab Twitter, when I'm looking at Arab media, whereas 10 years ago, if Israel was in conflict with anybody, whether it was in the south of Lebanon, or it was in Gaza, or whatever, the rest of the Arab world would be, standing up at the UN and, furiously condemning Israel and damning, and they'd be marching in the streets where they'd be, marching across the Israeli flag and doing all that. This time round, there hasn't been a lot of that. And that's really, really interesting, because, I look, for example, like even in the United Arab Emirates, which now has a peace deal with Israel that came in under Donald Trump. They're actually, I wouldn't go so far as to say hugely supportive, but they're kind of maintaining a dignified silence, which is a very, very interesting thing, because it's leading to sort of what you're saying. Whereas I think now with the with the growth of social media, I mean, we started off at the top of this by saying that social media is a disaster and it's tearing us all apart. But that's because we're sort of in Western countries that aren't necessarily used to being manipulated. But in other countries, whether it's China, whether it's certainly a lot of the Middle East, where they've not had that ability, and they only had state-run press, and they had vigorous censorship. And, if you said the wrong thing, you could actually look forward to a knock on the door in the middle of the night. Social media is actually changing all of that, and it's allowing them to think, you know what, maybe my life isn't shit because of America or because of Israel, which is what they would have been told 20 years ago. Maybe it's shit because of, this person who's earning millions of dollars a year while I'm, struggling to pay the rent, and I've got $3 a week in my pocket and so forth. So, I mean, I don't think it ever really happened, but we were talking about, the Arab Spring that was supposed to happen a few years ago, where a lot of, there was going to be a move toward I wouldn't say necessarily more democratic sphere, but at least a little bit more sort of individual freedom, and that hasn't grown out. And, I pray that there is a critical mass of Palestinians who have the ability to overthrow Hamas, because at the moment, it's not possible to do that. I don't believe for a second that they all support Hamas, but I don't.
What Palestinians are going to be left?
I'm sorry.
What Palestinians are going to be left? I'm going to pick you up on 2 points. The fact that you haven't seen the House of Saud essentially come out means that you haven't been seeing both sides. They have come out strongly and condemned it. They have. Both the UAE, the Sheikh in Dubai, every single Arab state has come out and condemned it and has asked for a
Sorry, condemned what?
Condemned what Israel is doing. The extent of what they're doing.
I accept that. I absolutely accept that. But I'm talking about like the level of ferocity that one would
they know what is going to happen, and Israel is really playing with fire. No one wants a World War III. No one wants World War III. That battle has been waiting and simmering and waiting to happen, and being egged on to happen for years and years and years. I remember, I think it was 5, maybe 7 years ago, could be a little bit longer. And I was sitting in Australia and I was watching the Prime Minister of Lebanon having been held in Saudi. He was being held in Saudi, and we couldn't get him back into Lebanon. And there was something happening underneath. And now, I don't want to say conspiracy theory. I want to say my instinct.
Well, Lebanon's complicated.
No, but my political instinct took in, and I was like, they're trying to get Hezbollah to act in Lebanon, so they have a reason to go after Iran. I don't trust the government. I don't trust any freaking government. I think that's probably been my biggest eye-opener in this. If there was something new to come to out of this, was that watching those that I looked up to who swore red, blue, green, whatever, that they were true libertarians. The moment that this happened, not one of them are encouraging a ceasefire. Now they're saying, especially since Israel's come in, well, that's war. because of their religious belief or whatever it is. And I'm not talking directly to you, Daniel, because you know, as soon as this happened, October 7th, the first thing we did was call each other to make sure our families were okay. We knew that because we know how hard this is, but this isn't the civilians' fault. This is a larger government agenda at work. I can't believe for a single second that Israel, the one that Daniel Andrews sent police to the country to train, because their defense system is so high tech. They sell the arms to the world. Their defense is like no other. They have been an occupying nation for over 70 years.
But hang on, sorry, what have they occupied?
They've occupied Palestine. They've occupied the Gaza Strip and the West Bank.
But hang on, there hasn't been a Jew in Gaza since 2005.
Yes, you're correct.
I mean, there's 200 of them there now who are being held as hostages.
Being an occupier, and I'm talking on a government level, they have a responsibility. Gaza doesn't have a hospital, an airport. It doesn't have a port. It doesn't have self-determination. It doesn't have anything on the world stage.
Well, it does. Sorry, it is a coastal city. It does have access to that. But that was blockaded because Hamas were bringing in weapons by the shipload.
Yeah, but even fishermen can't go further, Daniel, into Gaza, into their ocean to go fishing. They only have a certain amount before they see all. Look,
I accept that, and I blame Hamas. I mean,
country, Daniel, please let me speak, honey. The occupying country, okay, has a responsibility to the people it is occupying. Now, for me, I sit there and I look at Benjamin Netanyahu and I know how much Israelis hate him. A month ago, they were protesting in the streets to get rid of him. He is so filthy and corrupt. He has brought in such a strong right-wing government. And what is the one thing that keeps Netanyahu in power? It's war. No ifs, no buts. No ifs, no buts. So, of course, keeping Palestinians under thumb, under not being able to breathe. Do you know what it feels like to want to go from your house to your uncle's house and have to go through checkpoints?
Look, I'm not the biggest fan of Netanyahu at the moment, but it is important to say that he wasn't elected off the back of this conflict. There is a timeline there. He was elected, and then this happened. Now, is this helping him politically?
Yes.
Yeah. It potentially is, because I mean nothing sort of unites Israel like like a war. But I mean, I'd certainly sort of reject any suggestion that this was done for political ends, irrespective of what happened.
I'm not saying that it was done for that reason. I'm saying the reason it's continuing and it's getting worse and worse, and the escalation is getting worse and worse, because in a sense of crisis, people want strong leadership. And there is nothing that he brings more. He disrespects the entire world leadership. He doesn't care what anyone says.
Well, I think that's easy to say. I think that's easy to say from overseas. I mean, it's very easy for the rest of the world to say, Israel should do this, Israel should do that, Israel should cease fire, Israel should stop doing this. But there's a few problems with that. The first one is that whatever Israel does, whatever it does is going to upset someone. For example, 20, 30 years ago, there were regular suicide bombings happening inside Israel. I was over in the Middle East in the 90s, and it was not uncommon that every day you'd turn on the radio and you'd hear that there was a bombing in a pizza restaurant on a school bus, and so Israel would go to war, and a lot of people would get hurt because obviously Israel has a very advanced military. And then Israel put in a security barrier. They basically put a fence line right across the whole of that area, and it stopped. It completely stopped overnight. And what's fascinating is that was a completely passive, non-violent system, right? It was literally just, a fence. It had electronic monitoring and so forth. There were parts of it that were concrete where there were snipers, but by and large, it was a chain wire fence. And, it worked. Now, it infuriated a lot of people. You had a lot of people, calling it a wall, which it isn't, and saying it had to come down, and trying to compare it to the Berlin Wall. But the fact of the matter is that thing saved Jewish lives. And we saw a few weeks ago when they actually broke through it, like they actually used bulldozers to knock sections of it over, what would happen if that barrier, were not there. So when that got put in, you had people saying it's outrageous. And I mean, the Greens in Australia, I mean, if the three of us are going to agree on anything, it's that they're crazy, right?
They are.
If you look up their policy on the Middle East, it is one of the most, it's honestly genocidal, because one of their policies is the immediate dismantling of that security barrier. And if that happened, overnight, hundreds of thousands of, all hell would break loose. Now, needless to say, they're nowhere near getting near power, so it doesn't really matter what they say. But the problem is, in 2005, when Israel withdrew, something should have happened, which is that Gaza was like a market garden, and it's a very agricultural area. Israel had built huge agriculture. There were greenhouses there. There were markets there. That could have been turned into a thriving, prosperous economy. It's got a beautiful beach. It's a lovely part of the world. It could have actually been a tourist destination, which is like what Dubai is trying to become. And I mean, you will know that in the 70s, Lebanon was called the Paris of the Middle East, because it was a beautiful destination, and people would go there for holidays, and there was food, and there was culture, and there was it was a great place to visit. But then what happened is hardline Islamist groups took over. So, whether that was the Islamic Brotherhood in Egypt, or Hezbollah in Lebanon, or Hamas, or Fatah.
The civil war happened, Daniel.
No, I get it. But the thing is, one of the things that this does is it completely screws up that prosperity. And one of the biggest shames for the everyman in the Palestinian territories is that, if Hamas were given the choice between a future for their children, prosperity, growth, or murdering Jews, every single time they will choose murdering Jews. And that's not speculation. Like that's in writing. And so the problem is that all of these groups that will be the first to condemn Israel for doing anything, the one thing that they never seem to articulate is, okay, well, fine, if Israel's not going to do that, what should they do? Because the answer obviously is not, well, they should just die like good Jews. Because I think sort of out of the ashes of the Second World War, the Jewish people have said, when they say never again, they meant it. The difference is now, they have a state, they have an army, they're coming from a place of strength. So, I mean, this is the sort of inane battles I get into on social media with people, where people say, oh, it's outrageous that Israel is doing this. And I go, okay, maybe you're right. So tell me what they should do. And, sometimes they'll say things like, well, hand back that. And I go, well, okay. So, I mean, they did that. They handed back Gaza, and that was supposed to be land for peace. Nothing happened. So what are you talking about? And then they say, oh, from the river to the sea. And I go, okay, so you're now talking about like the whole of Israel with a population of something like 6 to 9 million. It doesn't work.
Do you believe in the 1948 borders, the two-state solution? Do you believe in those borders?
Okay,
yes,
so just a bit of history. In 1948, there was a proposal under what was then British Mandatory Palestine to basically divide the area roughly into two, and it was almost equal. And the Arabs, as they were then called, were going to have about half of it, and the Jews were going to have the other half. And the Jews were okay with that. But then what happened is they declared a state, and literally the next day, a number of Arab armies invaded Israel. Now, the problem is for the Arabs, they lost a war that they started, and sort of all hell broke loose after that.
But do you understand why that would have happened? I want you to picture this. I want you to picture that a government, and outside, let's say England. Okay, we've still got a queen. We're not a republic yet.
King now.
Okay, and imagine if the Queen turned around and said, look, guys, I'm really, really sorry. You have a population at the moment that really, really, I'm trying to think of a conflict zone that we've got a lot of immigrants from at the moment. Help me out here. Okay, let's just
Melbourne.
say that's Queensland. None of us are from Queensland. No, let's talk about let's just, for example, say India. Okay, we've got a huge Indian population here in Victoria.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's say that the English turned around and the Queen said, "Hey guys," or the King now, sorry, turned around and said, "Hey guys, look, they can't. There's a huge war. They were persecuted. You've got about 200,000 of them now. You've got about 2.2 million of them now. Okay, it's not working." It's not working. We need them to have their own space so they can feel safe and they can feel included. Not a problem. Okay, guys, come in and just choose what you want. We've given you about this area. And if there's people that are living there at the moment, just kick them out. And from there, the Arabs came together somehow they came together and they went into war and they lost. Now, instead of turning around and saying, hey, okay, you know what, we've lost, let's draw these lines, let's get to the table so we're both living together with peace and prosperity. No, we've turned around and grabbed a bit more land. And then from there, continued on the settlements. This land grab and this eviction from homes is still happening up in the West Bank, where Hamas doesn't exist. That's run by the Palestinians.
It does a little, but it's mostly the PLO.
Okay, yeah, but the whole point being is that of course they had a right to feel disenfranchised. Of course they had a right to feel disempowered. Of course they were going to fight for their homes. They lost. So be it. And Israel came to be. From then on, every single person should have been brought to the table at the same level as everyone else. Now, if you look at the world stage, you tell me, outside of the absolute filthy rich oil countries that are supplying the rest of the countries, what Arab person has the same level of respect, is treated in the same way on the stage? They're not. They're treated like nothing. They're on the side. That is why Arabs are upset. That's why they feel so disenfranchised. Because they don't have their own autonomy, they don't have their own power, and no one is willing to have that conversation with them.
I think that's a very sort of Western point of view, because it admits the fact that over there, children who in this country would grow up watching Sesame Street, over there watch TV saying, it is good to die for Allah and you should kill Jews. No. And that's happening since since birth. Well, Maya, it is. I'm sorry. I mean, I can show you dozens and dozens of videos.
I know. So I'm going to give you a bit of history about me and Daniel and how we met.
Go for it. Shooting the breeze. I am still here. I'm just.
You want to really know history about an Arab and a Jew? Here we go. Okay, the one thing that we learned, when we first met each other, the first thing he asked me was, "What's your religion?" And I said, "Oh."
That wasn't the first. I think the first thing I asked you was, "What are you drinking?"
No, it wasn't, because I wasn't. No,
he was already holding a drink.
Yeah, and no, he was like, let's say within the first 5 to 10 questions. All right. Anyway, he turned around to me and he said to me, "So what's your religion?" I said, "Oh, Druze, Druze." And he goes, "Oh, you guys fight with us. We're good."
And by the way, I was probably the first Aussie you'd ever met who even knew what a Druze was. Right?
Not true, but yes. No? Okay. It was an interesting point of view. And I went, okay, not a problem. We sit on opposite ends of this conversation. Straight away I knew it. And I went, nope, I don't care. I want to know his soul. I want to know who he is.
She was gazing into my eyes.
I was gazing into those crystal blue eyes, and I was lost. It was very late as well. And anyway,
now we're digressing into. Yeah. I wanted to bring the conversation. This has been a fascinating conversation. I'm learning a lot. I wanted to bring it back to something that you've both talked about, and that's the use of information and social media and the control of information by both sides and by other external parties to control the narrative and to control what we think. Now, Luco, you said before that in the Western world, we're not as used to being brainwashed by the media. I would say I disagree with that.
Oh, no. We are, but we're not good at spotting it,
Well, in Western Australia, where there is only one newspaper, which is owned by Kerry Stokes, who is best friends with the Labor Party, they weaponise that newspaper against law-abiding firearm owners. I'm talking about the doxing, but every day it's so clear that it's just a propaganda arm of the Labor Party. So Western Australians, wake up and seek your information elsewhere. That's my first piece of advice. But the use of the media and social media to put out narratives to control what we believe. Now, when I saw the vision of those paragliders going into that dance festival in the desert and what happened to that, I think she was a German tattoo artist, that was too real for me, because that could have been, I love going to music festivals, I love traveling, that could have easily have been me. That cut me really deep, and I've tried to stop looking at it because it's just too much. And then every week in Perth, every Saturday, there are marches through the mall where I work, Palestine marks, those remarks about killing the Jews, I've heard them in Perth in Western Australia. Maya, you were saying before that it's now in Australia, this conflict that's why we're talking about it, because it's not so far removed. It's not just on the TV anymore. I remember growing up and watching it with my nonna, who was obsessed with it because he came from war-ravaged Europe after World War II, and he hated Yasser Arafat, but he didn't really have a solution. He just got really fired up about it because he was triggered from what he went through in war.
Yes.
So what is your advice on when we're looking at social media? How do we know what's true anymore? And then we have the misinformation bill that the government wants to tell us what's true or not, which is a whole other kettle of fish. But I want to get both of your thoughts on that, because you've both been outspoken about this issue. Maya, what do we believe anymore? What can we do to actually know what's going on there?
We need to not listen to mainstream. That's all there is to it. I don't believe anything that comes out from Hamas, and I don't believe anything that comes out from the IDF or Israel government. I don't. What I believe is what witness states on the ground. It was absolutely shocking what happened to that girl. It was disgusting. It was traumatizing. It was re-traumatizing for a lot of women who've gone through actual violence as well. You're right. That could have been my daughter. I love to go to dance festivals. That was my thing. She's 13 and she's already drawn out what tattoo she wants when she's 27, when she can get her license for one. Wow. She's not aware of it yet, but it was absolutely scary and horrific, but it wasn't something that I hadn't seen or experienced before. So I found myself sort of trying to put the flames out down here in Victoria, and a lot of my friends, and especially women, again, who'd been traumatized by violence. They're like, you can't defend that. And I was like, guys, that's not abnormal. I'm sorry you've had to see this for the first time and witness it, and I'm so sorry that it's scarred you. But that is the reality of what's happening in countries all around the world. That is what's happening, okay? And our governments choose to ignore it. I mean, America just handed Afghanistan back to the Taliban. What do you think's happening to those women? Okay, so this isn't something that yes, I'm disgusted by it. I'm not shocked by it, because I've been around this level of violence for a long, long time. Arab media, Lebanese media, doesn't censor, doesn't put a filter. There's nothing. We see it firsthand. We see the children. We see them, whatever's left of them. And it's heartbreaking. But it has gotten to this point because of a lack of leadership and a greed of power. This did not need to come to this. Hamas did not need to have that much power in Palestine. It did not. It was wanted to have that much power in Palestine out of sheer desperation, because no one is listening to them. No one is listening. It has been going on for 70 years and more. They don't have their own water. They can't go to school.
No, there is an aquifer there.
It's controlled by Israel, and they turn it off.
Israel. Okay, so look, this is a good example, because Israel supplies about 11% of Gaza's water. Gaza sits above a massive aquifer, right? So Israel did turn off water, because they thought, if you're going to bomb our people, why are we sending you electricity and water? And I can sympathize with that. But then, of course, the whole world said that they're all going to starve, and that was just simply not true. And so, but that message traveled around the world. So I understand why you believe that, because I was reading the same thing, but I went away and I looked it up, and I said, where does Gaza get its water from? And I mean, it has a river that runs through it. It has an ocean. It has an aquifer. And then you find out that you've actually got to do research. I mean, I think, like Kate, people who normally sort of watch your podcast are probably not huge in, Middle Eastern politics. So listening to Maya and listening to me, they've probably, heard some things for the first time, and they've gone, oh, wow, I didn't know that, because everything they're used to can be sort of like distilled down to a single tweet. And, I absolutely agree with Maya that I think, there's a lot of propaganda, and I mean, all sides in any conflict are going to use for propaganda. I don't think one side has a monopoly on that, and that's been around, as long as there's been war, and there's propaganda that's meant to, from your government to your people. So like the keep calm and carry on, that sort of stuff, or let's destroy the Bosch. That's propaganda. There's also propaganda that you aim toward an enemy to demotivate them, or to inspire and up uprising there, and leaflet drops and Hanoi Jane, and foreign broadcasting. This thing has been around as long as war has, and I think most people are smart enough to recognize that, but the real talent comes in actually knowing, if whether or not what you're hearing is the truth. I mean, if the last few years, living through COVID and everything else would have taught people just because the government says something, it may be, total crap. And so then if you look at that at a much broader level, it's a problem. Now, on the one hand, social media was meant to kind of break down these traditional media walls and sort of democratize it. But of course, at the same time, that hasn't been without its faults either, because they used to say that a lie can be halfway around the world before the truth has a chance to get its trousers on. Well, thanks to social media, a lie can be 50 times around the world before anybody even knows what's going on. And so we saw that a few weeks ago, where there was a missile fell on a hospital in Gaza, and of course straight away Israel was blamed for that. And you have like schmuck Greens Senator Jordan Steele John, who's condemning Israel and saying it's a war crime. And then, of course, when it turned out that it actually wasn't Israel that did it, it was a jihadi rocket that fell short, and maybe that many people didn't die and so forth. No one kind of retracts that. People just sort of move on. And I think this has been years in the making, because now we have this kind of 24-hour news cycle that's almost come down to like the first person to share a tweet gets the most retweets. 20 years ago, journalists had deadlines, and there was time to fact check things and file things, and things could be changed overnight. Now, messages get pushed out, and if I would tell anyone anything, the same as like I'm going and I'm reading Arab tweets. You need to consume a wide variety of media from a wide variety of sources. You need to force yourself to listen to things you hate. And I'm reminded of that, every morning when I find myself turning on some of the ABC radio channels. But you need to do it, because even though, it does get the blood pressure up, and, it does occasionally mean, remote control goes through a TV, it allows you to sort of, best case, maybe hear or see something yet you haven't, but worst case, it allows you to actually see, like when you see two people watching the same movie on two completely different screens, you can understand why they might have a completely different version of it. But if you have some sort of understanding of, what they've been hearing, it does make a lot of sense. The problem is that, we now live in a world where it's the same as, Maya and I could sit for hours and hours, and I don't think the two of us are going to solve the Middle East, but we can talk about it for hours. But everyone else, wants to sort of boil everything down to a placard. So it'll be, free Palestine, or it'll be, kill Hamas or whatever, without looking at, a broader picture there. And so everybody's got lots of slogans, but nobody necessarily has the solutions. And what I would tell all of these people is, seriously, just shut up, because, I mean,
you're not from the region, shut up.
Yeah,
exactly
because
right.
one of the you don't have to
up.
be from the region, but at least know what you're talking about, or stay in your lane. Because one of the things that I was chuckling to myself about today is I said that if of course the Greens here are like at the vanguard of political hostility toward Israel in Australia. But I was thinking that if Israel had put all of the Palestinians in forced labor camps and was forcing them all to make solar panels and wind turbines, would the Greens complain about it? Because that's exactly what's happening to Muslims in China, right? And yet there have been no marches in the street here led by Adam Bant saying, free the Uyghurs or give them a life. So, why is it that, Muslims in the Palestinian territories who have been aggressive, right, are all of a sudden the world's greatest victims, according to the Greens, and yet Muslims in China who've done nothing wrong but are basically subject to human rights abuse are not getting a thing. And then it actually made me think, what, perhaps the Communist Chinese Party has a deliberate desire to make everybody in Western countries all fighting each other and pulling us apart, because it's classic divide and conquer. You've now got people on the streets of London, on the streets of America, on the streets of Australia, who are all fighting. And, whenever things like this happen on any big issue, when a government or any government wants you looking over here, what you've also got to do is you've got to zoom out, and you've got to think, well, hang on, what am I missing? What am I not looking at? Because, like China could have taken Taiwan last week. No one would even know about it, right? Because we're all looking over here. And the only way around that is to be, voracious and to consume, so much media, but, that comes at a cost. Your mental health suffers, your blood pressure goes through the roof,
You can
and so it's not easy, but it's important.
You cannot unsee something once you've seen it. And I'm really, really conscious of that as well. So, my husband, especially, he reads a lot. He reads a lot, and he's very, very vested in what's happening in Palestine at the moment, in Israel. And I've had to say to him, it's not good for your mental health. Switch it off. If it's a video, don't click on it. You don't have to click on it. You've seen it 1,000 times already. You don't need to relive that imagery.
Yeah.
Okay. But unfortunately, in Palestine at the moment, it's a reality.
Well, there are Israeli parents that I know who have said to their kids, "You're not having TikTok at all, because they're worried that Hamas is going to live stream murder." On TikTok, and try taking TikTok away from a kid these days. They'd rather lose an arm. So that is a real problem. But I mean, the other thing that's happened recently, I mean, look, wartime propaganda and fakery has been around for a while, and there's a thing called Pallywood where Hamas have been faking things for many years, but now with like the proliferation of deep fakery and AI imagery, I mean, it's crazy what people are coming up with, and sometimes there's like really spectacular fails. There was a picture the other day of a Palestinian kid sort of doing this apparently and had blood, and then someone noticed that the kid had 6 fingers, and they start thinking, hang on a minute, what's these are all sort of AI generated. So it's going to become even more important for people to start thinking maybe what I'm actually seeing with my own eyes isn't real. And there's it's not necessarily states that doing it. It could just be someone doing something online and posting it, but then someone else sees it and they think, oh, that resonates with me. So it's like the ultimate clickbait. Like nobody likes seeing dead babies. So if you see something like that, oh, I better reshare that. And what you don't realize is that you are unwittingly potentially becoming the useful idiot of some really bad actors in this conflict. So before you sort of share something, before you double check, check your own facts, check your own history, or sort of stay out of it, or just kind of take a breath, because otherwise you are basically handing a free kick to propagandists.
Well,
and that's problematic.
Well, this is where I want to give a nod to Elon Musk and Twitter and everyone who's been blaming him, because community notes actually, before you share something, if you haven't actually clicked on the article, says you haven't read this. Are you sure you want to share it? So for all of everything that he's copying in regards to his free speech and yada yada, he's trying to do it as responsibly as possible. I've always had a bit of a soft spot for him. My son idolizes him, but he's proving proving it with his actions as well. Look, when it comes to the misinformation, there's always going to be misinformation. Like Daniel said, it's happened for as long as humans have been alive. The best way to make sure that someone gets onto your side is to lie to them as much as you can, essentially, if they're from the opposite, because the truth will always make someone question and lead them down their own rabbit hole of truth. So that is why this ACMA bill is so dangerous federally. I don't care if they turn around and say, oh, no, it's not going to be based on this and this is this. Look, the council 2 years ago, they were putting on cameras to make sure that asbestos wasn't dumped. All right. No, they went and they found someone who dropped off a couch. All right. They looked through the cameras and they did that for that reason. Or they tracked a phone. I can't remember. Anytime the government is trying to tell you that you need more surveillance, know that surveillance is going to be used on you. All right. And this is the same with the misinformation. Anytime they tell you, hey, you're not believing us, so it must be misinformation, then know that they are lying to you. And every single Australian has to get up and fight this bill. The submissions have already been put in through the parliament, but they didn't have a mandate for this misinformation bill. And I'm sorry, I know that governments need to have the flexibility to be able to change things, because, election cycle to election cycle, it's going to change. But things like free speech, and that's exactly what this is, an attack on free speech, an attack on the ability to see both sides and make an independent choice, is absolutely unacceptable and dangerous. And it's something that the Australian public cannot stand for. We have done an amazing job to make sure that our country has not been divided by race. And from someone who has come from a country that is divided by religion, I can't thank the Australian public enough, the amount of hope that it's given me that we can lead the world. All right? Because America's going backwards. They may have a great constitution that empowers their people. The government there is doing everything they can to suppress that, to take those rights away. We are starting new here. We are starting a new chapter. We came from a suppressed place, not knowing we were suppressed until COVID really hit and opened the eyes of a lot of people. And now we're coming into an awakening period. And I'm hoping that we're going to have a reversal. We need to ensure this ACMA bill is stopped in its tracks. We need to make sure that we are bombarding not just our MPs, not just our federal MPs, our state MPs, our councillors, our police officers, every single government agency you can think of. Write editorials to the newspaper and let them know that your free speech, okay, your free thought, your ability to think and make a decision as to where you want to sit on which fence is yours and will always be yours and will be for your children as well. You fight for that.
And I think a lot of the people, watching this are going to be, of a similar sort of political tribe or down, Kate's rabbit hole and so forth. And that's where they're going to end up watching this. But, there will be people online who would, hear what Maya just said and then, quickly sort of, look her up and go, oh, she's not from my tribe. She's not from my party. And they're going to go, well, you must be wrong. And you're a cooker and you're a conspiracy theorist and you're a lunatic, right? Rather than going, you know what, I don't know, maybe 1%, maybe 5%, maybe 10% of what she's saying is interesting. You know what? Let's look into this, because the sort of the tribal politics that's happened that basically means, it's no longer an exchange of ideas. It's like a football team where you will barrack for your team no matter how shit they are and how many times they've lost and how. But they're your guys, and that's what's going on. I mean, date outside your circle. You get on dating apps now, and you have people say, I won't date anyone from the Liberal Party, or I won't date anyone who's a lefty, and it's like, why would you do that? No one ever used to go up to people in a bar and go, excuse me, how did you vote at the last federal election, before you decide whether or not to buy them a drink.
I asked them. It's a litmus test.
Kate, you're not, Kate. You've never bought anyone in a bar a drink, so stop it now, right? But
everyone drinks. That's why I'm poor.
You owe me plenty. But the thing, and happy birthday, by the way. So put one more on my account.
We should have a birthday drink with her. To be honest, this is wrong.
Put one more. Yeah. So enjoy your birthday chocolate milk. So, but this is the thing. Like the tribal politics. I mean, everybody's familiar with the expression divide and conquer, and it's one of the oldest military strategies in history. It's a 1,000-year-old military strategy. Well, right now we're in the section called divide. And anything that you do that happens like that is a problem. And yeah, I mean, I think America is almost lost, because you see over there where people go, yes, we must all be united. We all have to be united on our side. And if you're on the other side, well, fuck you, you're wrong, and you have to be stopped and you have to be silenced. But we all have to be united.
At least they have rights. At least they have rights and a constitution. At least they have the rights to find for their individual.
No, that's true. That's true.
The perspective that it was written, our constitution, which I have behind my birthday card from my mum and
there's
dad.
Some birthday reading.
We have no rights in that. We couldn't even travel within our own country. I was stuck here for 2.5 years unless I got 3 injections and showed my passes to go back and forth between the border. And if there was one case, you can't come back for 2 months unless you.
Governments in this country do things that if they did it in America, you'd have 1 million people marching in the streets. If they did it in Europe, you'd have cars getting set on fire. If they did it in the Middle East, you'd have people getting shot in the streets, right? But they do it here, and people just like bellyache about it on podcasts, and nothing ever changes. But on the
they run for office. I ran. That's what.
Yeah. But on the other hand, it's a nice country to live in, and I think that's probably why we put up with some of the things that we put up with. But it's very important to take a long-term view of this: 20 years, 30 years, 40 years. What sort of future do you want for your kids, and what lessons can we learn from history? Because the stuff I'm seeing now is telling me that people haven't studied history. They haven't seen where things are. And I'm not just talking in the anti-Semitism in the last few weeks, but I'm talking like in the last few years. People have not got the message. They haven't realized it. And you only get that by studying and by reading things that make you uncomfortable and seeing things that make you uncomfortable and, listening to things that make you feel, uncomfortable. And it sounds like I've sort of just described myself first thing in the morning, but that's what people actually need to do. And if you're not doing it, you might think that ignorance is bliss, but basically that's how you become a sheep, and that's how you become someone who's incapable of thought. And when that happens, that's when like really malevolent forces can basically make you end up in a situation. And by that stage, you don't get the chance to change your mind. So you really do need to sort of open your eyes and open your mind.
Well, we're coming up to the hour. I just wanted to finish on one poignant note and a bit of reflection. So I'm not going to ask what's the solution for the Israel-Palestine conflict. I'm not going to ask what's your solution for this misinformation bill. Otherwise, you've given some good advice. I'm going to ask both of you, have we lost humanity? Where's the human element in this? And like I said, I'm not professing that understand what's going on there. I'm interested and I read a lot and I study history. But I feel like we're not treating each other like humans anymore. And I think government is responsible for changing our culture. I'm seeing it here in WA with what they're trying to do with my hunting and shooting community. I'm seeing governments overreach, and they take a little bit and then they take a mile. And now we're in this situation where, this podcast is misinformation. You can't own a gun because of your views and opinion, Kate Vance. Now that's what they want to do to me. You can't go to Lebanon anymore, Mayor, because you've taken too many flights, because now we're recording your climate change impact. It's all about control, and it's governments using people against each other. But I feel our responsibility lies with us treating each others like humans and with respect. Do we agree?
I completely agree with you, and I'm going to put that back onto the Palestinian conflict now. That it's exactly what it is. It's government control. What's happened to have over, I think it's over 9,500 civilians so far, with over 3,500 children die indiscriminately as part of war is not okay. It's not okay. It does. I had someone comment to me and say to me, well, what if that was your family? What if that was your daughter that was kidnapped and brutalized and da-da-da? I said, I would hunt the son of the bitch down. Sorry, excuse my French. I don't know if I'm allowed to swear. All right. But I would never wish that upon another family, another innocent civilian or human being. There are other ways. They have made their point. The destruction needs to end. The humanity needs to start. All right. And the solution to this is going to be, it has to be a two-state solution. I cannot believe anything else. I cannot believe anything else. You know what? Stuff it. Make it one state, but make everyone equal. Give them the same opportunity. Give them the place to breathe. They deserve to be. You hold on to your Jewish heritage. I hold on to my Lebanese heritage. This is where I came from. That is their Palestinian heritage. That is their homeland. They deserve to breathe. They deserve to breathe, and they deserve humanity.
I think there are ties that bind us. For example, falafel and hummus, right? Everyone in the Middle East will sort of claim it as theirs, but I have always felt that Israeli hummus is superior to Lebanese hummus, but Lebanese falafel is superior to Israeli hummus, and so it's the ties that bind us. And Kate, to answer your question, look, I think there is a lot of good in humanity. In many cases, they say ignorance is bliss, and they mean it. I mean, we're all very politically connected. We're news junkies. We consume a huge amount of media, and sometimes that can be exhausting and it can be depressing. And I mean, the other day, I found myself in the car and I was just spinning around the radio dial, and I went over like one of the sort of FM breakfast shows, and if you're listening to AM, they're talking about the war in Gaza, and they're talking about America, and they're talking about tax, and they're talking about inflation, and you want to drive your car into a pole, and then you switch over to FM. And they're talking about, we gave away $1 million in cash, and who's stooping who on maths, and they're talking about sex, and they're talking about dance parties and whatever. And it was kind of refreshing. And I mean, then I sort of got a bit upset, thinking, wow, there's people who listen to this crap all day, and then they vote, and then they have a say. But then there's a part of me that thinks, well, maybe sometimes just kind of plugging yourself back into the matrix and becoming blue pilled, taking the blue pill and switching off, would help you. Look, I think humanity is really important. I think there are some people, and I include Hamas in this, who exhibit no humanity, and I don't think I think they're beyond resurrection. I can also say that war can lead to peace. I mean, if you looked at how World War II went, I mean, the Japanese were nuked. They had a nuclear weapon drop them, hundreds of thousands died, and I think 250,000 died. But Japan now is a peaceful, thriving democracy. But that's because that conflict had a finite end. And from that end came reconstruction and came from people deciding, what they want. Whereas, the Middle East, it's been going on for 1,000 years. It could be going on for another 1,000 years. I don't know what's happening. But one thing that I really, don't like, and I mean, certainly, Maya, you'll know this was a concern for many of the Lebanese who were living in Australia in the 1970s, 1980s when Malcolm Fraser was around, that there was a new arrival that was coming over from Lebanon, and there were, for example, Maronites here who were very worried that people were going to be bringing their conflict from over here there to here. And I don't like seeing international conflicts being played out in Australia. I don't like seeing overseas battles being brought here, and I think a lot of that is being stoked and it's being fueled by social media because we now live in a world where there's a hurricane in rural America, and suddenly people here are freaking out about weather. Once upon a time, no one knew what the hell the weather was, over there. And it's the same with violence. Like people might see a shooting somewhere, or they might see a rally somewhere, and things happen here. I mean, it's one of the most bizarre things of the modern left here that 20 years ago, like they hated America. They they really didn't like America. Anytime an American politician came to visit, you'd have the the Greens and the left here sort of protesting it. But now they get like all their political cues straight off American campuses, and so 24 hours later, you have the same thing happening out here. And I think people just need to take a breath because humanity is really important. As they say, like sometimes maybe get off social media. What do they say? Go outside, touch some grass, right? Take a breath. It's really, really important because, our brains, I mean, we're actually a fairly primitive creature. We were never designed to deal with it. Our entire job once upon a time was like spread our DNA, grow, procreate, have children, die. That was our job. Everything else, our brains were never really configured, to sort of deal with this. And if you don't stop and just take a breath for a while, or just sit down and talk to someone, as we've done tonight, it leads to a very dark place. So I think humanity has a lot to offer. I'm not sort of, saying, Noah, get the boat just yet and calling for the, the 40-day rain and start again. Although, there are some people who think, gosh, maybe a giant asteroid hitting us about now wouldn't be a bad thing. Personally, I do. I think society has a lot to offer, but it is important that we all take a breath. We learn to get along. Don't use the block button. Listen to people. I mean, I try so hard not to block people. I actually listen to them. I argue with them, but it's only when people are completely beyond salvation that I'll hit that button. Whereas there are other people, they're just too soft and they don't understand how to do it. And so all that does is it kind of cements your own position in your mind to the exclusion of all else. And what if I told you that you could be wrong? So, it's really important for people to just calm down, take a breath, listen to other points of views, learn how to articulate yours in a respectful manner, but also learn how to, listen to other people. And then, look, who knows, one day with, enough hummus and enough falafel, we might actually be able to solve these things.
Well, on that note, this has been Shooting the Breeze with Lady Liberty, my special birthday edition. I'm off to put on my red dress, Matrix reference for you. I won't be going past Parliament House tonight, as tempting as it would be as a birthday present for myself. Some fireworks there would be lovely over Kings Park. But no, I'll be retiring. Thank you so much for coming on my show. What a fascinating chat. Thank you for giving us some insight and perspective on this conflict that just evolves every day. And thank you so much for your kind words about humanity. And on that note, thank you again for joining me. Maya Tesa, give her a follow on Twitter. Daniel Luko, vote Luko is his Twitter handle still, even though he's not a political candidate at the moment.
You can still vote for me, like Man of the Year or something,
And you can jump onto mine. Mine's Libertarian, Maya, and tell me how much I'm not a Libertarian because I love it.
Oh, we love that. That's how
I love that. You're never Libertarian enough.
Never Libertarian enough. Well, thank you again for joining me. Shooting the Breeze with Lady Liberty. I'll be back next week. Thanks again. Bye.